I have been faking a Scottish accent for 10 years. This is something that I am ashamed of, and I was wondering if anyone could relate. I was born in England and lived there for 5 years, before moving to Scotland. I immediately felt a bit left out because I was the new kid and everything just felt a bit odd and new to me. I found it hard to learn in class because of my teacher's strong Scottish accent, and everyone else seemed to be getting on just fine. I was in a small year group and everyone had Scottish accents. I decided from then on that I wanted to sound like them to fit in. I would talk to teachers and friends in my Scottish accent, but when I came home I would talk to my parents in an English accent, as they all had English accents. One day my mom heard me talking in a Scottish accent and she made fun of me for it, so I decided to never speak in a Scottish accent at home. It's been 10 years and I still do exactly the same, although it's hard to have friends over at the house because I'm so embarrassed if my mom were to hear. I'm worried to sign up to house prefect roles and other things because I will have to do speeches in front of the school which my brother will hear in my Scottish accent. I fear that this has become a bigger problem than I thought it would become. I feel like a horrible liar. I wish to go back to speaking in my normal English accent, which I realize is perfectly fine to have in Scotland. I have been trying to go back to my English accent in school for years now, but I never had the courage to do it because I always thought people would judge me, but now I think that it's too late. I started faking it at the age of 5, nearly turning 6. Now I am 15, turning 16 in a month and a half. I've even considered going to university in England to make it less obvious as to why I've changed my accent to English. Does anyone have any advice?
If you've been doing an accent from age 5 for 10 years, is it really fake anymore? At this point, you can kind of say both accents are real. I think you might be worrying too much. I think it's pretty funny. You could just go back to England for a couple weeks. And when you get back, just speak with your British accent and shrug it off if people notice LOL.
I come from a country where dialects are very common, and it's absolutely not unusual that kids have one accent at home and one accent out and about. At the end of the day, it's just about fitting in. Your dialect switching. A bunch of research has been done on it. You are not a weirdo. If your mom didn't want you to pick up a Scottish accent, she should have kept you in England.
I think this is so common you shouldn't worry about it. In the UK, so many people shift their accent around depending on who they're with, myself included. If you meet me on the street, I'm sounding more street. When I talk to my mum, I tone it down a bit.
I'd tell you to let your friends come over and while you're there use the English accent and explain that you picked up a Scottish accent years ago, but it's hard not to switch back to an English accent when you're home. Everybody wins.
Not really. My Scottish accent gets pretty weak in public, but if I'm at home with family or locals, my accent will go back to normal. It's a really common thing for your accent to vary based on who you are around. Look at people that speak multiple languages, for instance.
I moved my kids from New Zealand to Ireland when they were 2 and 4, and lived there for 8 years. They would speak in an Irish accent when at school, but speak in a Kiwi accent at home. It would have been weird to give them a hard time about it. Moving children obviously changes their accent. You're not faking it. You have 2 accents, which is normal. In fact, your English accent is probably not as English as you think. There will be some people who would be able to hear plenty of Scottish influence in it.
It's normal. I lived abroad and stood out for having a British accent. Grew up in the mids, but my mum's a hoity-toity posh twat, so I'm a cursed mix of both. So I began putting on an Aussie accent when we lived in Australia. When we lived in Singapore, it was a bit harder to mimic, but it made do. The problem was, when we moved back, I had a horrific blend of all of those accents for a couple of years. Honestly, I would slowly start decreasing the Scottish accent if you don't want to make a big deal of it or only have the accent at home and explain that it's just second nature. There's nothing to be ashamed of, as you're just trying to fit in and find your place.